Greetings fellow exile, I am the Blind Watcher and this is my Path of Exile 2 Flame Tank of Varashta build guide. Without further ado, let's dive into the abyss and become masters of the purple flame.
Yeah, so basically why this build even exists is that when I come home after a long day of work, I just want to relax in my chair, I want to run some maps, I want to kill some bosses, and I want to hoard some loot. I don't need to have to strain my mind or eyes too much, and this build is really designed to be very forgiving and easy to execute, while still being able to clear most content of the game in a decent pace. And the Flame Tank of Varashta build is, as the name suggests, based on the new Disciple of Varashta sorceress Ascendancy. And while this Ascendancy at first glance focuses heavily on the new djinn minions and the new skills that they bring, the Flame Tank instead opts for the new very solid passive skills that do not have to do with those minions. So what this enables us to do is to build a very tanky build while also allowing for some solid boosts to damage output. So let's go with some pros and cons of this build. Let's start with the pros. So as I see it, this build is very tanky. Our Ascendancy makes it so that 60% of our energy shield is turned to armor, which gives us a high physical resistance on top of everything else. We get a super fast start of energy shield recharge once we get hit, and we also get a lot of energy shield recharge as we have a lot of energy shield to start with. We also get 40% extra energy shield just flat from small Ascendancy skill points, and we get to equip an extra focus at half strength, which also yields like 150 to 200 extra energy shield from nothing. Meanwhile, we are very tanky, we also actually deal decent amount of damage, both to big groups of enemies, but also to unique enemies like bosses. Another pro of this build is that it's very easy to gear. We need to get as much energy shield as possible. We need to be resistance capped, and we want to have a fast recovery on our energy shield. Other than that, defenses are covered pretty much. For offense, we simply try to find spell skill gem level ups, and we want to find some increased spell damage etc. on the staff that we use and the focus. The game plan for this build is super simple. We light up monsters with Solar Orb, apply Living Bomb through an automated cast on Ignite mechanic, and then we just snap our fingers with Snap and see everything go to purple hell basically. Finally, this build seems to be able to clear every single content in the game without much trouble. Now I haven't done Uber Arbiter of Ash yet, but I've cleared all the other content. What I basically do when I map is that I just put 6 mods on, I corrupt them, and then I use empowered explicit modifiers and stuff on the Atlas tree, so it's much like Alk and Go basically, and there's never any big issue. Okay, so let's also talk about some of the cons of this build. So the defenses scales slowly at start, which can be a problem. You will get stunned, you will get ailments, and you will be quite squishy. And this is like the first primary goal when you get to mapping, is to get your energy shield up to at least 6,000 to 7,000, so that those passive nodes that give you thresholds for ailments and stuns and stuff like that actually kick in. Damage on the other hand scales good early but slows down very late. Because chaos damage is quite hard to actually scale on the passive tree, we will pretty much get all nodes that have chaos damage. And yeah, so when you have like spell skill levels on all the relevant gear, and you have taken all of the chaos damage nodes in the passive tree, then you will get to some kind of roof of this build. Now another con of this build is that it's not particularly fast. I mean, you get the movement speed from your boots, but other than that, you have no other means of traveling fast. I actually ran, and still run, a talisman as my second weapon, only so I could get pounds for those bosses when you really need to move fast in order to avoid one-shot mechanics like the Arbiter for example. If we look at the fundamentals of this build, we first have the Ascendancy class. And in the Ascendancy class we have 3 main nodes that we want to reach. It's the 4th teaching, which gives us a -1 second to base energy shield recharge delay, which is insane, which makes our energy shield kick in extremely fast. And we also get some extra energy shield recharge on top of that when our energy shield is low. Then we also go for Sacred Rituals, which gives us 60% of our current energy shield as extra armor. My build right now is at almost 12,000 energy shield, and that gives me approximately then like 7,000 extra armor for free. And then we have Instruments of Power, which allows us to equip a focus while we have a staff. And this is actually quite powerful. We get, for example, +1 to spell skill gems, we get +40% to spell damage, plus like 150 extra energy shield base, so that's probably like plus 400 or 500 extra energy shield just for free as well. And we can get resistances and a lot of stuff from this passive node. And then for the fourth one, I would recommend going for either Varashta's intuition. If you don't have that much energy shield yet, it's good to have an extra kind of buffer with health from mana. And later on, when energy shield goes around 10,000, perhaps above 9,000, switch to Navira as well to start your recharge rate immediately. But this is also good to just keep up because it gives you just a flat bonus to energy shield recharge as well.
We use two keystone passives for this build, the first one being Black Flame Covenant. And this basically turns all of our fire damage into chaos damage, including our ignite. Why this is powerful is that most monsters in the game, including bosses, do not have the same kind of resistance to chaos damage as elemental damage. So this makes it so we don't need to care about applying a lot of exposure, for example. We don't need to lower enemy resistances by the same amount, etc. So this raises our base damage that we do with just one passive skill point. The second keystone we're going for is, of course, Chaos Inoculation. When we gather a lot of energy shield, we have a lot of recharge and faster start of recharge. It's just a no-brainer to get immunity to bleeding and poison, for example, while also getting immunity to chaos damage overall. Okay, so let's go over our skill gems and how we deal damage with this build. So our main damage output comes from a cast on elemental ailment setup using Living Bomb as the socketed triggered spell. And we will ignite monsters using Solar Orb, which will then attach random Living Bombs to different enemies in our vicinity. And when those enemies take enough damage, the Living Bombs will explode. And this is obviously super good for wave clear, since Living Bomb has quite a sizable area of effect. But what surprised me when I first started experimenting with this build is that it actually works very well on single targets as well. We will attach our Living Bombs to the boss, for example. If we fight that, those will explode, new Living Bombs will attach immediately almost, because unique enemies generate more energy with cast on elemental ailment than other enemies. And since Solar Orb pretty much is a guaranteed ignite, we will generate more energy than we can actually spend. So this actually works well for single target as well as wave clears. Now it is also worth noting that while Solar Orb and Incinerate, which is our two main skills, so to say, they don't spend mana, we will still need mana in order to pay for the Living Bombs that trigger from the energy gained via cast on elemental ailment. So this means that especially in early and mid mapping, when you get to the end game, we will need a mana potion when especially fighting bosses in order to be able to attach a lot of Living Bombs very fast. And then later, when we have a lot of energy shield and we get mana from damage taken, we actually intentionally take damage in fights in order to gain mana instead. So then the mana problem is just vanishing. Our core skill rotation consists of Solar Orb, which I already touched upon and mentioned how it's used. And then we also use Snap. And actually, the weakest elemental ailment we can trigger with Snap is fire. So the ignite explosions from Snap actually doesn't do that much damage. But since pretty much all enemies in a group will be ignited, they will all compound, create a chain reaction, which will often blow up entire packs of monsters without an issue. Snap will also trigger Living Bombs that are attached to monsters in these clusters, which will further increase the chance of just completely wiping out entire groups of enemies with just one button. For unique enemies and beefy single target rares, for example, we'll also add Despair to the mix in order to lower chaos resistance by a fair bit. And then we use Incinerate as our main ignite and Living Bomb trigger spell. So basically we will, as soon as we have refueled our Incinerate, we will use that and channel that on enemy. This will trigger and explode a lot of Living Bombs in quick succession. And whenever we don't have fuel, we just cast Firestorm and we cast Despair to refuel Incinerate, and we Incinerate again, etc. Something that you might have noticed in the footage of this video is that we will create a lot of fire remnants when using this build. And the way I used to spend these is to infuse firestorms in order to create big firestorms. If we also add a Saruk's Refrain lineage support, it will also last a long time, so we don't actually need to constantly think of having Firestorm up. We cast it, it will live long and prosper, and it will help us add Wither, for example, with a support gem in order to further increase the chaos damage that enemies take. It's also good at cleaning up screens. If, for example, our Snap misses a couple of minions or something like that, we can just continue going and we can count on the Firestorm picking off the weaker enemies that didn't die in the first blast. Okay, so let's head into gearing. So I already touched upon this earlier, but basically defenses is really easy to keep up. We need to be resistance capped and we need to build a lot of energy shield as our main priorities. We want to have at least 2 charm slots for being immune to, or at least having some kind of negation for ignites and freezes applied to us. and then we just want to beef up our energy shield further by increasing our faster start of energy shield as well as our recharge rate. Now, some added bonuses maybe could be to have, if you can find it, some reduced ignite and shock duration and stuff like that, just further mitigating ailments that might affect us. When building for offense, our main priority is mainly to get skill gem levels. We don't have a mana problem, so we don't care if our skill gems are at an extremely high level. Solar Orb, as I mentioned earlier, is free. Incinerate is free. Firestorm, we don't need to cast that often, and mainly it is when we trigger living bombs automatically that mana is drained. So we want to have as many skill gem levels as possible. We also want to, of course, increase our spell damage with our staff and our focus as much as possible. And if we somehow get some extra damage of different types, we want to opt for chaos first, of course. Then we go for fire, and lightning and cold can also be good. I mean, we could, for example, apply shock and shields to some enemies if we're lucky. We also want to increase our total mana somewhat, but I reckon you don't need more than around 1000 mana in order to sustain and have this build running at full effect. And then it could be nice to also get some spirit. If we get, for example, like 15, 16 spirits, something like that, we can also run a Withering Presence, which increases the chaos damage taken by enemies near to us. And also it could be nice to get some extra damage recouped as mana on, for example, an amulet. As already mentioned, this build doesn't require any fancy uniques in order to function properly, but there is one ring that we really need to get, and that's Black Flame. And Black Flame might seem extremely redundant at a first glance. It gives us a mana regeneration, which is not a problem. And it also converts our ignite damage to chaos damage, which Black Flame Covenant passive already does. But what Black Flame does is that it reduces ignite duration on enemies, and this means that we can reapply ignites in a much higher pace. And also it's quite of a bonus that we also deal more damage with the ignites as they go along. Now the ignite damage is not something that is a main staple of our damage output, but it's still quite nice, especially for clearing of weaker normal enemies. It's also worth noting that this ring is really cheap. I got mine for 1 exalt. You can also juice it up by applying catalysts with fire modifiers. This will increase or decrease our ignite duration by another 10%, but that's really just a bonus, nothing that is really necessary. Another unique that is worth looking at, especially when coming into mapping and perhaps even slightly before that, is the Idol of Uldern. So basically this amulet has just one good property, which is +1 to spell limit, but this is actually very powerful early on, because this amulet is also very cheap, like 1 exalt. I got mine for a while doing the early mapping, and this will of course allow us to apply yet another living bomb at the same time, and it also allows us to cast more firestorms. It allows us to have more solar orbs up, so it synergizes a lot with this build. For example, you could say if you have 2 to limit to solar orb and living bomb, this actually increases our damage output by like 50%. But then it's more worth to exchange this with an amulet with +3 to skill gems, extra energy shield and stuff like that. But it's a really nice early late game choice. So for some of the more specific stuff for the gearing part, we want to have 2 charms at least. We want to gain temporary immunity to freeze and ignite. And then we also have the +1 to spell skill gems for our staff sockets and gain extra chaos damage. Now, the charms obviously are very cheap, but the other stuff on this list is not that cheap, so these are really late game considerations. We want the Soul Core, which gives us a faster start to energy shield in our focus. And then in the super late game you can also get an Olrof's Resolve Ultimate Life Flask, which will enable us to gain extra guard on top of our energy shield by tapping our Life Flask. Okay, so let's have a look at the passive skill tree. Now, in the path of building that you can find in the description, you will find a couple of suggestions. First, one that has a core setup with passive skills that I recommend you always keep. And then there's actually quite a large variety in how you can pick a lot of the passives for this build. So for the core, we of course need the Black Flame Covenant, and we need Chaos Inoculation. Then I would opt for the recharge stuff here for the meta skills, and this right here. Also we need to get the mana cost efficiency over here. We need to get adverse growth, which gives us mana recouped from damage, which is how we actually manage our mana. We need to take damage in order to not go and we want to increase our flammability magnitude over here. Apart from these core kind of passives, we are actually very free to vary how we want to build our build. So you can, for example, choose how much you want to spend into energy shield recharge, faster recharge, and how much you want to spend on the increasing damage via the chaos nodes. One important diversion for this general rule though is thresholds, which I've been mentioning a couple of times I think previous in this video. And thresholds is basically like, for example, dampening shield, where I mean, in general, in Path of Exile 2, your thresholds are based on your life, but since we run Chaos Inoculation, we only have 1 to maximum life, which means that we have no thresholds for stuns and ailments. And this means that in early mapping, especially before we have a sizable energy shield pool, we will get chain stunned a lot and we will die because of this. So we need to, early on in the late game, we want to allocate a lot of threshold increments. Dampening shield is one of those. We also have Hallowed, which gives 20% extra. This one is actually better, to be honest. And for example, here we have passive nodes that give 30% to either one if we have specifically problems with stun or ailments. So that's very important to keep in mind. So yeah, just check the path of building in the description. It will give you a core build which you should always have allocated, and then you're free to vary alongside that. So that's it for the Flame Tank of Varashta build guide. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please let me know by hitting that thumbs up, perhaps giving a subscription if you want to see more content in the future, and let me know in the comments if you apply some extra experimentation to the build. If you find out something that I mentioned in this video that's simply just wrong, let me know, and I should make sure to pin it in the comments. Thank you and have a nice day.